This is Spotlight, Episode 2, recorded on Tuesday, January 5th, 2016. Spotlight is brought to you by AndyMark. With the 2016 season right around the corner, don't forget that AndyMark is here to supply and support whatever your first team might need. Go to andymark.com. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Spotlight, Episode 2, where we interview interesting people from the FRC Community so you can be more informed and engaged. I'm Tyler Olds from FRC 2826, and holy cow, Collin Foltz from Indiana First. I'm so glad to see that you're here today.
Well, thank you, Tyler. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, and coming back, you weren't able to make last show, but you were here with us a little while ago. Do you mind just kind of reminding me of the FRC Community, what you do in FRC and what your background is?
Sure, absolutely. Right now I am on the board of directors for the Indiana First nonprofit. We kind of administer the districts in the state. My background, I was a student, I was a mentor, I was a volunteer, and for 4 years I actually had the privilege of working with Frank at First in New Hampshire as the kit of parts engineer.
Well, thank you for joining us, and Collin's going to be a co-host moving forward, so we're very excited to have him here. And I'm also extremely excited to be introducing our fantastic guest for Spotlight. And, well, I guess he's kind of your ex-coworker slash ex-boss, Collin, I guess. It's good guy Frank Merritt himself, director of FRC Robotics Competition and exotic food enthusiast. Welcome to Spotlight, Frank.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm just happy to be talking to you guys. I'm totally psyched for the show, totally psyched for the season. I'm just psyched.
And Frank's going to divulge everything about the 2016 season tonight, right, Frank?
I'm going to tell you everything that anyone asks. Mostly. Close.
So to start out today, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into who Frank is and learn more about his involvement in FRC. Then, as Frank alluded to, following we'll be taking questions that you submitted from either Chief Delphi, Reddit, or through email at firstupdatesnow@gmail.com. So Collin, Frank, you guys ready? Let's get right into it.
I'm ready.
Absolutely. So Frank, I guess if we could just start at the beginning, how did you first get involved in FRC? What was your first experience?
So I was working at Rockwell Automation. Rockwell Automation used to have a manufacturing plant about 2 minutes away from FRC headquarters, right on sort of the main street in Manchester, New Hampshire. I was the engineering manager there, and Dave Kelso, who you may know is a Woody Flowers Award winner now. He wasn't at the time. He was just an ordinary mentor. He called up and he asked to speak to the engineering manager because 131 Chaos had lost their build site. And I was the only, it's a manufacturing plant, but I was the only engineering manager there, so they just put me through to they just put him through to me, and he introduced himself, and he kind of said what was going on and asked if I knew about FRC. I'd kind of heard about it, but not too much. And we got together, and it just went from there. We found them some build space. Some of our engineers became mentors. I became a mentor, and it just blossomed from there.
All right, well, Frank, as we get into your career, you started out as the deputy director in FRC. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, I was hired I was brought in as deputy director. That was actually kind of a little bit of an interesting story as well, because while I had started mentoring 131, I also started some FLL teams. I started some junior FLL teams in my hometown. And FRC actually had an opening for the junior, at the time, Junior FRC Lego League manager, which is actually the job that I applied for. But after I had applied, they had already filled the deputy director of FRC position that they had open. But that person turned them down. First she accepted, then she declined, turned them down. Then they said, why don't you come on in anyway? We've got another job that you may be a good fit for. And so it was a total accident, really, that it ended up in FRC. Well, but yes, I started as deputy director.
Well, can you divulge a little bit more into, as a deputy director, what were some of your job responsibilities? What did you specifically do on a day-to-day basis?
So my first responsibility actually was to, we were prepping the 2009, the new control system back then, the 2009 control system, and they actually asked me to take over running that project team. So I ran the project team that actually introduced the 2009 control system, along with doing other things like it's kind of like logistics work, working on robot transportation. Started getting into the more on the judging management side of things. It was that type of sort of, I'll say, more, I guess I would call it less really strategic work and more sort of nitty-gritty work, just kind of learning the ropes. And I was FTA for several years, which is a great way to learn how to be a first part of FIRST, and really more along those kind of things. The more strategic stuff didn't come until later.
So Frank, you said that was kind of leading into 2009. If we jump forward a little bit into summer of 2012, a lot of transition happening at FIRST that we don't have to get into, but if you could just take us kind of through how your job role changed when you became the acting director of FRC that summer.
Sure. So what had happened is the prior director had departed, and John Dudas, who was president of FIRST at the time, called me into his office, and he said, "We want you to become acting director of FRC." And there was a lot of, as you're saying, there was a lot of kind of tumult at the time, and a lot of uncertainty about what was really going on. And I was excited and happy to do that. I felt that I was ready. I'd been with FIRST for several years by that point. And I asked him, "How do you want me to just act as sort of a caretaker for this position until you hire someone permanently?" And he said, specifically, he said to me, "No, we want you to be acting director. Act as if you are the director of FRC." So I said, "Okay, you got it." And from there, it was, it really had all the kind of the responsibilities of being the director. And I think I spent about a year as acting director before they decided to make the position permanent.
So that's the 2013 season then, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so 2013, you're named director of FRC. How did you actually get into that role? Like, you were the acting director. Obviously, you did a good enough job to get the role, right?
I was acting director. They brought in, at the time, they did a search for a permanent director. They did some, I don't know who they interviewed, but they interviewed some other folks, and
nobody who was good enough, right?
I don't know if they were, and they got offered the position, they got turned down, or I don't know what the situation there was. But one of the things that they wanted to do, because that was also a time when we were going through our transition in our presidency to our current president, Don Bosey, who's fantastic to work for, by the way. And what they decided was, I think they were getting ready to offer me the position a little earlier than they actually did, but then this transition happened, and they decided they didn't want to offer the director position without Don Bosey kind of getting involved a little bit. So I went in and I spoke to Don, and it went very well. And a few weeks later, a month later, or something like that, they offered me the position. I was just ecstatic. I can't imagine a better job. I'm just exactly where I want to be in the world in terms of my career. So I'm just very if you look at the whole series thing, it's just a series of accidents, and it's worked out.
Frank, I think I can speak for a lot of the staff when I say that summer. If it hadn't have been you, I think there would have been a revolution from the engineering staff. We were very excited when you were named official director as well.
Thanks.
So kind of day one in the office. So the acting is removed. You're now the official director of FRC. Can you talk about some of your priorities and your goals, how you wanted to push FRC forward?
Sure. Really, as soon as I became acting director, there were some things that were important to me. I really wanted to reduce the social distance kind of between staff at First Headquarters, and especially kind of the senior leadership at First Headquarters and the teams, because I don't like to operate with that sort of large, I'll call it a social distance. It's not comfortable to me, and it's not kind of the way that I like to interact with folks. I like to just have conversations and kind of speak one-on-one and like peer-to-peer. So I wanted FRC to become closer to the teams, and I really wanted to get back to sort of a being upfront and open and honest with the teams whenever we could. Obviously, there are some things that we can't, are confidential and we can't talk about openly, but I really wanted to focus on honesty, being open with the teams, and also shift our direction a little bit so that the teams were being treated more as the primary customers of First, rather than there was some sense, I think, in the community that maybe the teams weren't being treated as the primary customers at First. And I don't know how much of that was perception and how much of that was real, but I wanted to make it clear that we really want to focus on serving the teams. First has a lot of customers, sponsors, volunteers, you could even say our customers, the culture itself, but the teams really are the core, and we want to keep our focus on that.
Well, I can't speak for all teams, but I would definitely say, at least in my opinion, that perception has definitely changed in a couple of years. And kudos to you for in my opinion, the amazing job that you've done.
Thanks so much, and that's good to hear. And I'll tell you, Collin, was on the staff. We have such an incredible staff in FRC and really in First overall, and they're really the ones that kind of provide all that support, and they've got more good ideas than I could possibly keep up with, and that sort of sense that we needed to get closer to the teams and treat the teams more like the core customer. I think that has really comes up through the entire staff. It's not just me. It just happened to be, I just happened to be named as director, but really the staff is kind of all has that sense.
So let's take a little bit of a step back and into a little bit more general viewpoint. What are, as the FRC director, moving on from the acting director, what responsibilities do you have there, or what has changed since becoming the acting director for your responsibilities?
So not too much has actually changed between the acting director and the director positions, but the director is responsible for all the engineering work that goes on, so design of the field, FMS system, mechanical, electrical engineering, responsible for the kit of parts. Kate Pelat, our kit of parts manager, works for me. All the kit of parts work that goes on, a lot of the logistics work, as you can imagine, as FRC has continued to grow. We're looking at greater complexity and making sure the robots get to where they need to go and none of them get lost, and expansion of truck routes and moving to the district system. We have area managers that are responsible for supporting the district. So really a lot of sort of logistics type work. So logistics, engineering, kit of parts, really the things that I spent time in industry doing in terms of really it's production planning, sort of material management, designing for if you think of a design for manufacturability, we've got to design a field that can be assembled and disassembled, and if you think about that as sort of a process, that's something that's very important to us as well.
So, Frank, I think all of these things kind of tie together into the game design committee, right? And the game that's put out there for the teams every year. All of those different responsibilities all kind of focus around the GDC. And you and I spent countless hours in meetings and walkthroughs and robot designs and things like that, working on the game every year for 4 years. I guess can you dive into a little bit about what your role is in designing the game, who makes up the GDC, just kind of talk about where that process is now, maybe compared to where it was a few years ago.
Sure. So I actually lead the game design committee. Several years ago, the game design committee was a a more well-defined and smaller, what I would say, smaller group. So we had 7, 8, or 9 folks, and when you said who's on the game design committee, you could list these folks, and that was pretty much the folks that were on the game design committee and kind of did the game. The way it's evolved in recent years, if you were to ask me who was on the game design committee for the 2016 game, for example, I would be hard-pressed to list all of them, because there would literally be dozens of people who were involved in one way or another. So it's less an approach where we have sort of a well-defined group. You'll probably remember not too many seasons ago where during kickoffs, when we were crazy enough to be trying to do them live, we used to have the named members of the game design committee come out, and they would be introduced in somehow and so forth. And that was an approach that wasn't completely comfortable for me, because I think that the game should kind of stand on its own, and I like kind of the way that things are going now, where you know, there are so many people involved. Everyone has a hand, and I'm probably going on longer than I need to here. But essentially, there's no sort of master list. Like I said, if we were to list everybody through all the steps that we take in the game design, there would be dozens and dozens, and you couldn't say to any one of them, well, you're not on the game design committee. Well, they contributed to the game, so really they did. They are, you know.
So let's take a little bit of step back from that, and we'll be talking more about the game design and the process of that when we get to some of the user-submitted questions.
Okay.
But I mentioned before a little bit, you know, at least personally to me, you seem to be the most personable director in FRC, at least in the 15 years I've been in FIRST. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the transparency that you do offer. That, you know, there's a lot of great communication that comes from you specifically, and I think that adds a lot of that human touch to FRC. And you mentioned a little before how you want to treat, you know, you want to address that perception that maybe first people didn't think they were the right customers or something like that. But what really drove you to become more transparent than maybe some of your predecessors?
I think it has more to do with I don't want to kind of compare myself to my predecessors so much. Everybody had their own style, and I have a great deal of respect
Sure.
for the folks that came before me. But for me, I just personally really appreciate honesty and openness in my dealings with people. So I think maybe that just kind of carried over into a style that worked for me with FRC, and I think that there was almost a sense of not fear exactly, but there is always a sense, like every time I have to go on the blog and apologize for something, which I seem to do pretty often, there is always this sense like, well, here's another mistake I made that I've got to apologize for, but to me, that I've always gotten more positive responses from taking that approach than trying to not talk about an important topic. And it's not possible to get to everything, and some things happen that we have to address privately. We can't do in a blog or something along those lines. But I think it's just more of a personal sense, the way that I just want to be more conversational. I just felt like we should be more conversational with our dealings with teams.
Absolutely, and I think I think feedback from the community there is extremely positive. So Frank, obviously kickoff is on Saturday, 2016 game.
Yeah, it
is right around the corner.
Yeah.
What successes from 2015 are you looking forward to sustaining for 2016?
I'll tell you, 2015 was an interesting year, and I think 2014 was kind of an interesting year as well. I don't know if you're sort of picking up on a pattern here. So let me preface that my answer a little bit to that. I think of students on FRC teams, and I think I've said this before in many different forums, and I'm not sure Collin, you've probably heard it before, but I think of students on FRC teams as having sort of careers in FRC. So their careers might be, hopefully they're 4 years long, but maybe they're, say, 2 or 3 years on average. So rather than thinking of the games sort of individually, think of it as you're trying to deliver a variety of experiences to students over this 2 or 3 year period. So you don't want that experience to be the same or very similar year after year. You want to get some variety in there. And 2015, we really took a step out of the box, literally and figuratively, with the teams, and of course the way that we did the game design as well. I'll tell you that we were very nervous about this no size limit rule and the transport configuration that we had as well. I think some of the takeaways from the game were that there are a couple of big ones. First, we can change kind of the size limits, and it works out. And yes, I know you had teams, as we expected them to do, looked at the rules and said, okay, I can call something a robot by putting a piece of equipment over here and a piece of equipment over here, and you know, having a piece of dental floss between them, and that's my one robot. But that's fine. You know, we expected that to happen. We wanted to see that. So I think the fact that we could sort of reach out that standard size of the robot, the fact that we could get rid of bumpers in certain cases and it would work, and for me also, and I think some other folks would agree, the fact that we could actually get away from win-loss tie in some certain if the game works with having an average score. And I think that average score kind of the average points values really lended a different aspect to the games that the teams really had to consider.
What about non-game specific successes? Were there things in 2015 kind of outside of the game that went really well that you want to continue to push to 2016?
Non-game successes. I think we continue to make gradual progress on the direction, for example, that we take the game manual. We've started doing something that we call allow but educate. So a situation, for example, where we say you can have as many motors as you want, but if you do that, be aware that you have certain electrical limitations on the robot, and here's a little tutorial. If we'll click on this, it can help you work through what you may want to consider there. So in a way, it's giving the teams more freedom, but we're also trying to kind of educate them a little bit at the same time and say, you can do this, but you may not want to have as many motors as you can actually fit on your robot within the weight limit. So I think that sort of direction with a little more flexibility, especially. And I think the more open approach we're taking on the Q&A, where we're trying to be a little more, I guess I would say a little more conversational, maybe, you know, having a little bit of sense of humor in there and not coming across, I guess in my mind, I know I'm rambling here a little bit. Another way to maybe reduce this kind of social distance between like the GDC, who used to be these folks in kind of a high tower that was way up on the mountain, and kind of bring them down a little bit so they're a little closer to the teams. I don't know if that's a good answer for you or not, or if I was kind of circled around the question a little bit there. Sorry.
That's great. No, I agree with those completely. What about kind of looking at the other side of that coin? What are there any improvements that you can talk about that you're excited to implement for 2016?
Yes. So, are you talking about the game or just kind of in general itself? Sort of
both.
Okay. So I think some of the learnings that we had, I guess I'll talk more about the kind of the learnings that we had in 2015. Not that you can expect that this is going to influence anything specifically for 2016, because I'm trying to stay away from that. We did try this mode where for autonomous you had to have sets of things, like sets of 3 robots, sets of 3 totes, sets of 3 recycling containers. And what we saw was, well, we had hoped that would kind of encourage teams to work together on alliance. In some cases, I think what happened is it sort of put a chill on some folks to say, well, yes, I could push a tote out there, or put in a program to bring a bin out there or something like that, but then for that to really matter, the other two need to do that as well, and maybe that kind of actually lessened the amount of sort of autonomous that we wanted going on. So in my mind, that was that was an important learning element. But we're continuing to make progress in the other areas as well. Actually, for the first time ever, at least in the modern history of FRC, if you think the modern history going back 8 or 9 or 10 years, we're actually going to be doing, and you're not going to believe we're not doing this already, we're actually going to be doing on-site head ref training, which we had never really done before, or at least I said in the modern history of FRC. But we realize how important a position that is, and we want to be able to bring the head refs out to New Hampshire, do some actual on-site training with a field set up, and so that to continue to work to get more consistency kind of in our lead volunteers.
Frank, I think that's the lead referee thing. I think is a fantastic idea, and I think, as you said, it's really just getting that consistency out there, because it's hard though, because they're volunteers, right? And I think a lot of people expect a lot because it is an important position, and rightfully so that they should. But I think that's an awesome idea that you guys had moving forward, and I really look forward to seeing the results of that being implemented.
Yeah, we're looking to we're trying something, we're trying something, to say it all the time. We expect the teams to try something new. We got to try to we need to try things new as well to kind of move us forward. And I think we will. We're going to gain a benefit there, because really it's not just if you go to LRI training, you go to FTA training, it's not just sort of the technical learning that takes place. It's related to being in the same room with your peers and hearing their stories and comments, and building a sense of kind of community of camaraderie among your key volunteers that have the same very important positions that you do.
All right, so before we get to our AMA segment with your user submission, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsor for tonight on Spotlight, Andy Mark. You guys know these folks are working hard out of Kokomo, Indiana, to bring you what you want in the first season. If you haven't had a chance either, check out their website. They got fantastic new products going on over there. Head over to andymark.com and click the new products for the 2016 section to check it all out. Personally, I'm excited about the new 6-inch Dura Omni wheel, which is a vast improvement, I'm told, over the 6-inch Omni wheels and other wheels out on the market. The body of this Omni wheel has been totally redesigned with durability and mobility in mind, and designed intended to provide a smooth roll along with the ability to handle impacts very well. The body is made from black polycarbonate, while the rollers are each molded with a nylon core and TPU thread. These rollers spin smoothly on a capture dowel pin. So last year, I know my team used the Andy Mark Omni wheels on the front of our robot, and I know we're eager to see what applications we can try this out for. Andy Mark wishes all teams the best of luck in the 2016 season, so go ahead and check them out at andymark.com. And we thank Andy Mark for their support of Spotlight. So, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for a few questions from you in Chat Nation. We asked you to submit questions via Chief Delphi and Reddit, and we try to get as many of these questions on here as possible, and some of them may be omitted just because we addressed them earlier in the show, or it was something Frank can't answer. But Frank, the 2016 game coming up ahead, we're going to talk a little about that, but are you ready to take on the barrage that is the FRC community?
I'm ready.
All right, Frank, our first question is from Eric from Team 1923, the Midnight Inventors. He asks, what is the #1 administrative change that you'd like to see happen to FRC in the next 5 years?
The #1 administrative change, I think that as the districts, we continue to grow the number of districts that we are, we need to kind of find a better way to handle, and maybe this is more logistics than administrative, a better way to handle kind of the number of fields that we need to get out. As you know, if you take say a state that's got 50 teams and it goes district, well, now they're running twice or 3 times as many events as they did if they just ran a single regional or 2 regional or something like that. And every time that happens, we need to work out sort of the logistics of how do we get those game specifics to where they need to be, what's the best way to pack them, and that sort of is something that is progressing and developing. Every district sort of uses their own. Some districts use those kind of storage pods. Some districts have their own trucks, and we have to sort of get a better handle on, okay, what system actually are we going to be using here to sort of transport these things. I also want it from an administrative side. One of the other things that we're doing is we're becoming more, FRC is becoming, I would say, more tightly integrated with our volunteer resources department. As a matter of fact, one of the other changes that we're making with volunteers this year is that we've actually are giving all of our key volunteers basic all of our key volunteers basic customer service training. We want to gently introduce the concept, which many of them have already, that the teams are kind of the primary customers, and how do you deal specifically, first work that concept in and say, we want to recognize the teams as the primary customers, and also how do you deal with customers that are upset, so that they can feel like they're heard and that they're, you're actually addressing that their whatever their problem is. Also on the volunteer side, they're introducing a volunteer bill of rights so that the volunteers can understand exactly what they can expect of first, and then we're kind of solidifying volunteer expectations so that the volunteers know what is expected of them, they know what they can expect from first, and they have some basic understanding of the approach that we want to take to teams as being our primary customers.
Our next question comes from Marshall from FRC 900, the Zebra Corns, and he asks, what is FIRST and FRC in particular doing to get more alumni involved as mentors and volunteers beyond simply just collecting information from them? And more specifically, how are they using the data that they have already collected, and how can local teams get access to this information so they can contact these alumni?
I can answer the second question. Is I have no idea how the data that's being collected is actually being used. As to the first question, we actually had a meeting that was driven by sort of marketing and development to look at this alumni challenge that we have, and it is something that we've been talking about for years, and we just haven't found a good way to really address that question. How do we even find out who are all our alumni? You'll probably remember Dean has been talking about this for years, where 5 or 6 years ago, he said we wanted to find all of our alumni, and we had some sort of database that we just recently shut down because it wasn't really being used and we didn't know how to use it. I don't have a good answer for that one, I'm sorry. All I can say is that it is a priority at the top level of FIRST to get our handle on this alumni question. I don't know the details about how that's being run, and I can tell you that from an FRC standpoint, that is something where FRC is very focused on kind of current year activities and more issues related to sort of the game and logistics, and less so with alumni and recruiting mentors or that kind of thing.
So Frank, our next set of questions kind of move into the game design realm. Can you talk about, for you, what are the components of a good game, and kind of what are your and the game design committee, as nebulous as it may be, what are their goals kind of at the start of the game design process?
A good game for me, it always starts out, I know that this is a cliche, but it's something we take very seriously. A good game is a safe game. And there have been times in the past, for example, during Ultimate Ascent with the Frisbees, where we had to make a change. I think it was very close to Stop Build Day, where we said, okay, we can't throw these Frisbees anymore, because when we went to week 0, we knew that the Frisbees were going to be, there was going to be a lot of Frisbees being thrown. We didn't have a solid sense, and that was our fault for not doing, kind of the more complete testing we could have for how hard it was to control these Frisbees. And so we had to put a rule in really that was driven more by safety than anything else, because the Frisbees were just going everywhere, and it was just not great. Beyond that, we look to create games that have strategic depth and so that there's no one obvious way to kind of play the game or defeat the game. And we love it when unexpected strategies sort of develop mid-series in the middle of competitions. We want to see games that are fun to play and fun to watch. We want to see games that have encourage a diversity of robot solutions, games that are easy to ref, so that we don't have forcing refs into this difficult situation where they have to make a lot of sort of subjective calls. Games that are easy for the field to build. Really, I could go on listing these, but those are sort of the core ideas. And of course, if you put all these things together, you would say, well, there is no one game that could possibly do all those things, and it's very hard to create a game that can do all those things, as you know, Collin.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's changed a lot about how we design games, at least that I had to think about when I was there, was just the explosion of COTS parts in the last 3 to 5 years. Can you talk about the impact that has? What do you think the biggest COTS part impact has been over the last couple of years, and kind of where do you see that going? If there's anything that you can say about that.
Sure. I think that the biggest step that we took forward in terms of COTS parts, now I don't know when we actually started this. It was probably more than 5 years ago, but when we started with kind of providing teams with a basic chassis that they could assemble, I think that was a step forward. I think the obvious one in terms of what COTS part has kind of made the most impact would be the Robo Rio that we introduced last year with our friends and partners at National Instruments. But if you just consider how the amount of work and the amount of design time and the amount of development time that goes into introducing a new control system platform. And from what I was seeing, it was pretty smooth. I mean, it went pretty well, and the teams, I didn't hear a lot of negatives about the Robo Rio. It wasn't like the C Rio where it was a great controller, but it was kind of big, and you had these little bits kind of sticking out, and it looked a little kludgy. In the Robo Rio, it just looks great. In terms of the future of COTS parts, that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for it, other than it would be wonderful if we could have some type of COTS system that would easily allow the teams to do sort of field location, so that they would know where they were sort of on the field fairly easily, with more like a plug-and-play type thing than kind of what they have to do now. But that's speculation. I don't know that such a thing exists.
That's not a hint or anything, people.
That get us to the accuracy that we need, which is really realistically within a couple inches. But
sure.
So our next question comes from David on FRC 3928 Team Neutrino. And Frank, you did allude a little bit to this before, but what would you say directly for the 2016 season, what the biggest positive change for FRC teams will be, in your opinion?
I think the biggest positive change, well, I can't, of course, talk about the game, but well, maybe you guys can invite me back and I can talk about the game after kickoff. But I think the focus, there's really kind of two focuses. I already talked a little bit about the focus that we're providing more on volunteers and helping them, giving them the tools that they need to kind of do their work and do it efficiently and effectively, and focusing on sort of as I've said several times during this broadcast, focusing is on the teams as kind of the primary customers. I think we're going to see some movement there. Obviously, we're just taking like a first step, but I think that's going to grow over the years. And the other thing that's very important to us, and we want to focus to make sure that as we grow, we continue to focus on our core values. And we released a statement from the Woody Flowers Award winners a few weeks ago that I think summed up very nicely kind of the focus that we want to have, that you want to win, but you want to win by doing your best against an opponent that's also doing their best. And we want to avoid I'm not going to mention the New England Patriots, but oh geez, no, I want to avoid kind of this stretching the rules to their absolute limits, and as long as it's not illegal, then it's okay to do. We have to go. We are better than that as a community. I think we have to push past that.
So Frank, getting back kind of on the game design process that we talked about, Ben from Team 3641, the Flying Toasters, asks how early the game designers get done with the game before kickoff, and kind of what the typical development cycle is for one game.
It's been done for 2 years, right?
I am happy to announce that the 2016 game is scheduled to be completed tomorrow. Just in time for the manual to be downloaded. Really, it does. We do go in terms of the process itself. We really do go until a week or two before kickoff. I mean, most of the rules for 2016 have been in place for at least several weeks now, but that doesn't mean that the work is done in getting the manuals all set and double checking for typos, all that kind of thing. And then really was there another part to that question? I'm sorry. That was a question. That was the answer.
Just how long a game development cycle takes.
It's typically about a year. And we are not, just to be clear, I know that there's some rumors out there, we are not 1 year or 2 year or 3 years ahead on FRC games. We are not ahead at all. We're just in time. Well, if you look at things right now, for example, 2017, we have some ideas in the hopper, but really in the hopper.
Oh, okay.
Was that a hint?
No, that wasn't a hint. But really, we haven't. We're trying to get started right now in the 2017 game. But we have, like I said, we have some ideas set aside, kind of on the shelf. But we've got a lot of those ideas on the shelf as well. But we have a little bit of a starting point. But really, we haven't started in earnest, I'll say.
All right. So, Frank, our next question comes from Ahad on 4592 M3. And the maybe preface, you talked a little about what the things you do, when you're looking for a good game, right? Mm-hmm. But how does FRC specifically test games for spectator friendliness and design?
So for spectator friendliness, we don't test. What we do is we try to, because I'm not sure how we could actually do some beta testing with spectators, but what we do is we try to imagine the game from a spectator standpoint. We also have, and this was something that actually Collin initiated when he was with us, a rules review team. And what we do is we select 8 or 10 or so respected members of the community who have had no experience whatsoever with the game. We bring them in to take a look at the game when the rules are maybe 85% or 90% complete to our eyes, not like all the I's and T's are dotted and everything is perfectly grammatical, but the substance of the rules is there. And then we show them the game. And their specific task is to look at the rules and see if there's something that we missed, some obvious thing that just isn't going to work, kind of what do they think, are the point values that we have kind of in the right areas and so forth. And we also, because they're there, we also ask them, what do you think about the game overall, and they'll give us their feedback on that, kind of looking at it almost as if they were, kind of spectators seeing it for the first time. Now, they happen to be experienced FRC folks, so it's not exactly the same because, they've all seen many FRC games in the past, but it is a little bit of a help there. In terms of testing sort of the game mechanics itself, it depends on what the game is. Example in for Ultimate Ascent, we had never really built a climbing robot before, so we built a robot. It didn't have any wheels, but it could go up to the second level of the tower. So that was one element that we tested. In that same game, we also built a mechanism that could throw frisbees, because we had never really built a frisbee throwing robot before. It wasn't on a robot, but we just tested a mechanism that was just kind of like on a little cart you would wheel around, just to say, okay, is it reasonable for a team to be able to throw frisbees? And yes, it was in both cases. So it really depends on the game. If it's something where, we've kind of done it before, it's a similar game object, we don't sort of build a lot of robots. If it's a new mechanism, a new challenge, we build some just to test it, to understand ourselves whether it's feasible.
Frank, our next question comes from Jake from Team 316, the Lunatics. What is your favorite FRC game?
I would say my favorite, well, I love all FRC games, but some I love more than others, and I would say that my favorite FRC game, I think I've already mentioned it a couple times, Ultimate Ascent really had a lot of things going for it. It had a great, unique game piece that was just beautiful to watch when you saw it sailing through the air, especially when you saw those full court shots. I think there's no other word for it than beautiful. You're seeing these long range tosses that were going in the goals, and that was great. It had an interesting challenge with this sort of incline climb at the end, which I know pushed for teams that attempted it. It pushed many of them kind of to their limits, and they told me that. And it just had a lot of things going for it.
So another question from David on 39-2018 Neutrino is, and there's a couple follow-ups to this too, is you previously mentioned something about testing a format for webcast at IRI the past year. Are webcasts going to be standardized this year, and will there be any support from FRC for that?
They will not be standardized this year, but this is a one of those projects that we seem to have trouble getting traction on. It seems to be the kind of project that when you have other things pop up, that kind of goes to the bottom of the priority list. So we did test some streaming with some equipment at the Indiana events last year. We wanted to test some alternate equipment this year, and unfortunately some other things kind of took priority. Now we still may be able to fit that in, but if we do anything this year, it's going to be more in terms of a pilot. So we're trying to find a good combination of sort of equipment and ease of use, so that we can have a sort of a volunteer easily be able to set the equipment up and run it and so forth. And even when we get through those sort of equipment hurdles, we have the hurdles of internet connectivity, because I think something like 40 or 45% of our events this year are going to be in high school gyms. And high schools, sometimes they have great internet connection, sometimes they have lousy internet connection, and even if you say, well, you could just use your cell phone connection, some of these don't even have that. It's a real challenge. I think what's going to happen is we're going to come up with eventually get to a point where we have a relatively simple solution that works pretty well in 80% of the events that we have. It's going to be hard for us to get kind of that 100%.
And I think one of the things to me, Frank, I think part of the maybe lack of a better term frustration comes from not necessarily just the live webcasts themselves, but also the archiving of the events too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe one of the questions somebody asked is there going to be any, not necessarily standardization, but encouragement in regards to getting each event to actually archive everything? I mean, it's free to store on YouTube, right?
Sure.
So what's holding either FIRST or the events back from consistently doing that? I mean, it's a lot of work, right?
I think that's a lot of what it comes down to, and it really becomes a question of priority when you have so many other things to do, and you want to say, well, this would be a nice to have. I would love a system in which every match in every event every year was archived, and you could go to some database, whether it's YouTube or whatever else, and you could say, okay, show me all of the matches for that 15-19 played in 2016, in the month of March, and it would just pop them up. And in my eyes, that's sort of an ideal end state. I think it's going to take us some years to get there, but there's really nothing technical preventing us from getting there. It's just a matter of making the sort of the investment and the time and getting everyone else on board and saying that this is something that is valuable.
Frank, can you, our next question is from Mitchell from Team 1714, More Robotics. Can you describe your most inspiring experience that you've seen in FRC?
Sure. So there was a young man named Johanse, and I think his last name is Salamu, I'm not sure. But anyways, his name is Johanse. He's an Air Force cadet. and he told his story at championship. He was homeless. He was kind of living in the school. He found the FRC team, completely changed around his life. He's now in the Air Force Academy, or maybe he's just graduating, I'm not sure, studying engineering, doing all the right things, and just kind of hearing his story, was really starting out with nothing and then getting involved in FRC, to me was very tremendously inspirational. But I kind of run into these things all the time at events. It's rare for me to go to an event and not be inspired by something that I see, either an individual or a team or a mentor or something along those lines.
So our next question, that's a cool story. Our next question is from Samuel from Team 2869, the Regal Eagles, and this may be a little controversial. What is your favorite regional?
Oh, my favorite regional?
Oh.
Yeah, what is your favorite regional?
You can't say all of them, Frank. That's definitely a cop-out.
Can you repeat the question, please? I don't think I heard.
It is, what is your favorite regional?
Or how about regional experience, at least?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. I honestly don't know if I have a favorite regional. I think because the way I tend to do things is that I'll visit various regionals. Every year is kind of a different set, for the most part, a different set of regionals. I'll tell you the characteristics that I like at regionals is I like to see regionals where, and this seems obvious, where the volunteers, the teams, and everybody are actually having a good time. Sometimes I go to regionals and it just looks like either the volunteers or the teams or the mentors in some cases really just don't seem to be enjoying themselves, and I don't know exactly what it is. If it's maybe they're kind of their third event of the season and they're getting tired of what the situation is. But that's when I feel good, because I think FRC is an activity where you can look at it and you can have a good time while you're getting a lot out of it. It's not sort of one or the other.
Frank, if I can ask real quick, I mean, when you're at an event, do you really even get time to sit back and enjoy an event, to really find out what the event's really about? I would think you're so busy with so much going on. I would think.
I'll tell you, I actually do. It's really okay. I mean, when I get to an event, since I stopped FTAing several years ago, I actually get to go back and talk to the teams and kind of, see what's going on in the field and talk to some of the drivers. So actually, it's not so bad. I actually do get to enjoy it. The only time I'll tell you, though, I don't, even though I've been on the Einstein field, I don't know, for 4 or 5 years now, I don't know how many actual matches I've seen, because I'm always staring at that monitor to make sure it doesn't go red. I just spend all my time worried that the system is going to go down or that something else is going to go wrong. I don't know how many actual Einstein matches I've actually seen. I get to watch them on replay, though, so that's pretty good.
All right, our next question comes from Anthony on Team 4004 Mars Rovers. It's going to ask the ultimate question. Chat room's been asking it all night. Are we going to see another game hint before the season starts?
No, sorry, no game hints. No more game hints.
What about that 93284 number?
Oh, the number. Okay, I'm pretty sure what that was one of our marketing folks put that out there and just typed a bunch of numbers randomly. But I don't want to spoil anybody's fun on Chief Delphi. If they want to keep analyzing the number, that's fine. But I think it's just a random set of digits. That's my theory. I don't know. I haven't talked to the person, but that's my theory, is that it's just a bunch of random numbers.
So Frank said no more game hints, so that means that there are other game hints.
Yes, there are many more coming.
I think we talked about the kind of the teaser, which was sort of this mega. I don't think we ever released so much information about a game before the teaser. We gave the game name out. That's kind of a big deal in my mind.
Absolutely. So Frank, our last kind of serious question before we get into some fun ones. Alex and Mike from Team FRC 2122 Team Tater ask if there is any update on how the split championship logistics will be handled, like the committee deciding which teams are going where and all that stuff.
Sure. So we've actually been meeting. We've got the committee, which I announced. I think there was a blog somewhere where I listed out all the folks that were participating, and we've been meeting weekly for the last 8 or 9 weeks. We actually just had a meeting today about that. We're getting close, and our task is to make a recommendation to senior management, who will then either act on our recommendation or ask us to try again. I don't think they're going to ask us to try again. So we're very close to making a recommendation to senior management. Now, how long it takes, I have to write the thing up. You know, it could be doing that next week because I think we're at that point where we're ready to move forward with that. How long it takes for sort of them to review it and say, okay, either yes or no, or take another shot at that, I don't know. But our intent is to release information to the community as soon as we can, as soon as we get sort of the okay on what we have, which is sort of like a strategic framework. So what I'll say, I appreciate everyone on the committee. They're really very focused on it, and I think we've got a workable solution. So it has been a lot of work. Like I said, it hasn't been dead at all. It's been a regular series. I probably should do a blog update, just letting people know, hey, this is kind of where we are, because I'm sure other people are interested as well. But hopefully within some, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks or so, we'll be able to get something out to the community. But I don't know. It depends on the response of senior management to our recommendation.
And you don't really have anything else going on. I would think you could find time to put that together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's time we end the interrogation from the FRC community. Let's ask a couple more lighthearted questions. One of them I just pulled from the chat because I popped up. Somebody mentioned your cat was walking around a little bit, and they want to know what the name was. Is it Corn Dog?
I've got two. We've got 2 cats. One is called Kronk, and one is called Frodo. And I can't tell them apart because they're both like that tiger stripe, you know? Oh. I just call them Cat.
Everybody wants to know everything about you, Frank. It is an AMA, I suppose.
So, Frank, our next question is from Eric from Team 1197, the Tour Bots. He asks, and I agree with him, what on earth is wrong with Hawaiian pizza?
Oh, are you kidding me? What is right with Hawaiian pizza? Oh my God. I just can't, Hawaiian pizza would be fine if it wasn't the pineapple. Just pick the pineapple up. Why would you even bother who puts fruit on pizza? What
Hawaiian
sane person?
With a little bit of sriracha on
it. No, let's be serious for a moment now. I'm getting serious. What sane person puts fruit on pizza?
So Frank,
what is your favorite answer?
Frank, what is your favorite type of pizza?
Oh, I like pepperoni is tasty. Pepperoni and mushroom. That's pretty good. Yeah, I could go with that. I don't get too carried away.
So no, it doesn't seem like you at all. Francis from FRC 190, Company and Herd, wants to know, is Frank short for anything? Is it Francis?
Nope, it's just Frank. I couldn't be more boring, Tyler. It's
couldn't be more Frank.
It's just Frank. On my birth certificate, it says Frank.
All right, Frank, and our last question, John from Team 1714, the Hilltoppers. This has been asked to presidential candidates as well, so you may have seen it being there in New Hampshire. Is Joe Flacco an elite quarterback?
I don't know who that person is. Now, what does that say about me?
He's a quarterback.
Guys, honest to God, I live under a rock. I have no idea who Joe Flacco is.
I mean, he won a Super Bowl, and some people forget that.
Was it a while ago?
4 years.
Oh, who cares?
All right, and sorry, John was from 17.
He's not even playing anymore. Well, he's playing. He's out for the year, but that'll happen. All right. Well, hey, that's all the time we're going to have for Spotlight tonight, guys. Frank Merrick, Director of FRC Robotics, thank you so much for taking your time, letting us in the inner workings of FRC. And with the FRC kickoff right around the corner, are there any last words of wisdom you want to drop upon teams or anything you want to talk about?
Just want to encourage teams to dial in for the webcast for Founders Reception. I'm going to be putting up a reminder about that on the blog pretty soon because Honestly, I don't even know what time it is. 7:30. I don't know what time. It's probably like 7:30 or something. Anyway, there's going to be a webcast at Founders Reception. I'll put it up on. I'll find out the details. I'll put it up on the blog. Webcast at Founders Reception. It's going to be sort of brief, like 30 minutes long. Gives you a little insight into what's going on there, and we're going to be revealing a little present that we're going to be giving the teams. That's going to be in the kits the next day.
Nick, did you have a time on that? I know he's got it up on the screen, but yeah, tomorrow I believe it's at I think it's 7:30 Eastern off the top of my head. But.
That sounds right. That sounds right. And then there's going to be speeches after that, but you can decide whether you want to stay around for those because sometimes they go a little long. But but yeah, check it out.
And I'd like to also give a big thanks to Collin Foltz for joining on the show as our co-host. Thank you, Collin.
Hey, it was my pleasure. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And Nick Olson working behind the scenes as our producer. Nick, thank you. And Chat Nation, all that we ask from you is if you like the show to tell a friend, tell somebody about it, post in your favorite social media site about First Updates Now. We'll be getting some more information about our social media platforms and websites very soon. You can subscribe through our Twitch, YouTube, iTunes, or RSS feeds. This is going to help us grow even more as a community. We really want to start to grow this year. We want to start to get bigger and better as a show. And so one thing I got to bring in before we sign out, we have another person that's been in the call a little bit, but we got to bring him up on the screen. So we got, who's here right now?
Hello to the First Updates Now community.
Mike from FRC.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks for having me.
And Mike, you're from FRC Top 25, and today's the big announcement day, isn't it?
It's a big announcement day. So this announcement's kind of on behalf of myself and my counterpart Justin, who's celebrating his, I think, 30th birthday today at the Sabres game. So he couldn't be here, but
happy birthday, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, the FRC Top 25 has been running a weekly web show during the competition season for the past 5 years. We're entering in our 6th season this year. So we've the past 5 years we've been running kind of separately from other web shows or podcasts that have kind of come and gone along the way. So we're very excited to announce that we're going to be joining forces with First Updates Now community and Tyler and Nick and Collin going forward. So we're going to be joining forces with them to bring you guys a weekly show. There's not a lot changing about that FRC Top 25. We're still counting down the 25 through 1. It's just going to be kind of in a more condensed format. But you can catch our segment every week on the fun recap episodes. So those will be happening weekly throughout the competition season. So again, not much is changing, but we'll have more details coming forward. We're going to hang out a little bit after this show ends and kind of talk a little more logistics and kind of give you some more information. But we're just really, really excited. We met, Tyler and Collin and Nick by doing the FRC Top 25. So kind of joining forces with them is something that we're really excited about. And it's to benefit the community, the first community as well. We know the competition season is super fast-paced and congested, and so much is going on. So to give you guys kind of a one-stop show throughout the week or weekly is something that we hope is really going to benefit you. So on behalf of Justin and I, we're really excited for this, and we're really looking forward to kind of this new format and seeing how it goes this year. So again, we'll be hanging out after the show ends, and we'd love to answer any questions and kind of talk more about it. So thanks.
Yeah, Mike, and thanks for giving that out, and we are really looking forward to having you and Justin joining our new show, which is called Recap, as Mike alluded to. That's going to be starting actually next week. We'll be starting the Recap show, so that's going to be running during build season, during post-build, and then as we get into the regional season, we'll be bringing through FRC Top 25 to count down the top 25 teams. So as Mike said, I mean, when we get in the competition season, not a whole lot's going to be changing. We're going to be condensing a few things, streamlining a few different areas, bringing in some new segments, some new guests, that sort of thing. And during the build season, we'll be talking about what's going on with teams, what are our teams that we're a part of doing, what strategies are we imposing, and where are we looking at moving forward as well. So more information for that, you can go on the Top 25 website that's currently being updated to the First Updates Now as we bring them into our family. We're very excited for that. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed Spotlight and our show we had today. Our email address is firstupdatesnow@gmail.com, and you can catch Fun Network shows live weekly on Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Starting next week, will be weekly at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. The next show recap will be on next Tuesday, the 12th, and next Spotlight show will be on the 19th. So if you're able to tune in for a recap, we'll be talking all about First Stronghold, what's going on with it, and we have a few other great segments to show you as well. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next time here on Spotlight.